there's a lot to learn from this system as far as it just seems like the more you delve into it, more things seem to come up, like with the challenge rolls and
Right, but it's
whatnot.
all interesting, is what I'm saying. I have
Yeah.
not yet found a single thing in this system that makes me wince and say, "Oh shit, that's terrible." Right?
Hmm.
Nothing. I haven't found it yet. I mean, not that I'm like hunting to criticize, but my point is that given a whole bunch of its considerations, um, I really like the fact that regardless of your damage roll, that if you hit a critical, you'll stun them. So it's not waiting on the damage roll to see, right? So a critical isn't just a heightened chance to stun them. You stunned them. Even if you
Right.
did 1 point of damage, you stunned them. That was a critical, right? You get that.
Right.
I like that. The one thing that makes me wince slightly is that it maintains the absolutely unnecessary notion that characters start with poor skills and have to build them up
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
nothing, which doesn't really match the character conceptions. Because otherwise, all of character creation makes a really interesting dude. And you'd think that the interesting dude is going to have a couple of skills up there at 5 and stuff like that. You know, at least a couple,
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what yeah.
Yeah. And
That's
even
what we're
like the
agreeing on.
living God,
You'd think
right?
the living
Channeling
God
is
would be able
very
to channel a little bit better, at this point? Right. I mean, are we just out of. I mean, here's the thing. In the games that prompted this one, because if these authors weren't familiar with RuneQuest, I'll eat my hat. I know they must have been, right? There's a
Right.
lot of it's not identical, but there's some feel there. And what they did in RuneQuest was start super from the bottom in the original game. And I have found that the only way to coherently play beginning old style RuneQuest is to specifically make it a teen fic drama. Specifically, that the characters are in their mid teens. They are not adventurers. They are not, you know, scarred veterans of anything. And then their kind of crappy skills and the fact that it's very generous in improving them makes a lot of sense. Um, Other times when I've played old school RuneQuest, I just started with characters with much higher percentages because it just doesn't make any sense to be running around as a battle hardened warrior with, a ride of 15%. I mean, what on earth, right?
yeah.
Um,
Uh, yeah.
and then we go to the issues of D&D itself, and there's D&D in this too. Specifically, I think not Moldvairmenser, but Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I kind of smell it, in this rule set, and the I mean, you can see it with the D8s and the D4s, and stuff like that. Although that's a little RuneQuesty as well, but mainly in this die,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
the biggie though is this sense in from that rule set there was always this confusion about how a first level fighter is better than most of the fighting guys out there. Most of the fighting guys out there are 0 level. That's sort of the statement. And you're running around at first level, and that's why the name of the first level in that system was veteran.
Mm.
But that fictional notion about your fighter is meaningless in terms of leveling up from level 1 because system wise he is a doofus. He's fit to fight a giant rat, and that's a one-on-one
Yeah.
that's a one-on-one fair fight, my friend, right? So when first level monsters are big centipedes and big rats and extremely feeble kobolds, you're kind of like, wait a minute, how much of a veteran, am I really supposed to be? And and then especially given the bloat in hit points on the way up. I mean, when your character's viable at 6th level and reasonably heroic at 10th, what was I back there at first level? What kind of crap was that? So the advancement system just doesn't make any sense with the fiction. So
And the artwork.
yeah, oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
if you look at artwork of like fantasy characters, everything you see looks like you don't want to mess with this guy, but like he's rolling,
yeah,
plus
exactly.
0.
Exactly. Well, it's
It's
tricky. I mean, they kind of, by the time Advanced Dungeons and Dragons came out, that kind of leveling thing had become, they were trying to reconcile it. Dave Sutherland did these really beautiful illustrations for the DM guide in 1979. They run across the bottom of the pages, and there's 4 of them, I think. So there's like a first level, the party at first level, the party at 4th level, or 6th or something, the party at 10th, the party at 15th. It's not labeled, but it's pretty easy to see, given the things they're fighting and the circumstances that they're in. So you kind of get the idea that, you start off as kind of like the game Torchbearer. You kind of start off, with your stick and your and your dagger, and then you work your way up, and now you're, wearing Elric armor, fighting the demigod and stuff like that. But still, but really, to me, that's like forcing the fiction to match the numbers.
Yeah.
They were forced to say, okay, well, if that's what the numbers do, then the fiction's got to look like this. But still, it doesn't make that. I mean, the spread is so vast between like 1st and 20th level. Just the spread is so incredibly vast. Here it seems a little bit more sensible. I mean, you're really not going to get that many more hit points, for example, in this system.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to, I mean, your body isn't going to become like, nightmarishly more powerful than it was. A little bit, but not much, right? You can bulk up a little or get a little quicker, but you're not going to really expand out of the scope of the original attributes. You're going to get a lot more skilled. But even with the system that it's got, I mean, especially because it becomes more pricey to get your skills up in advancement points, seems to me if we started with, a handful more skill points, instead of a couple of 1s and a bunch of 0s, we could easily have started with a couple of 5s and a couple of, a few 2s, and then be studying other things. And it wouldn't have hurt the game at all, right? Just to start with more skill points isn't going to hurt anything, and it would kind of make a little more sense for your character to genuinely be good at the things that they actually did.
Yeah, that's why I like to be kind of generous with the like you were saying, the maxing the advancement points. I totally agree with that. We at this point, we need to. I felt like we're kind of in new territory, and I wanted to kind of give you something to.
Oh, it makes perfectly good sense, and we're allowed to spend them as we go. I mean, it doesn't make you go back to town and train or anything like that, which I kind of appreciate. That for a game which sort of prides itself on combat realism, it sort of admits that advancement is more dramatic. And that I might be looking at the map and say, well, I've got my points here, my skill points. Well, this is the skill I really want to use, and I'm real tired of that penalty, so I'm elevating it. I'm getting it out of the studying right now. This is where I learn it, okay? Like right now. That makes a lot of sense. And it also seems like with the slightly higher points, I mean, yeah, Robbie's right. We could be seeing a lot more cool magic right out of the gate, right? But aside from that,
I'd like to see that.
That's the only system. Easily correctable at the table. Easily adjustable at the table to just start with more skill points. And otherwise, though, I mean, the way things resolve, the sense of, how do I play my character, off the traits and stuff. It actually feels really grounded. I mean, the setting does not quit. The setting just does not quit. You're always able to feel grounded in the culture if you try.
It's evocative, even when it kind of leaves it vague. It's like, wow, okay,
something there.
Brain's working on it. Mm-hmm. Would you either of you want to at some point, when you're not too busy, run a game of Darkurthe? Is it something that would interest you, or does it seem like
in the fullness of time? Yes, but frankly, you're doing just fine. You're just
well, thank you. I just meant just curiosity. It is like looking through the book. If it just seemed like it was a lot of
totally
upkeep.
does. I mean, I've got all sorts of stuff. I mean, geez, I would love to let myself loose creatively on the city of, the half elf city. There's
Oh
there's two. The sort of half elf realm has two cities, and it's so weird. One of them seems to be this xenophobic hive of insane warlocks, and the other one is multiracial and has like assassin women of all the different races, and appears to be some sort of like outlaw melting pot place.
yeah, that's
And it's just like, all right, the half elves are a really dodgy bunch in this game. You've got your sort of blend in with the humans. We're fine, we got elven backgrounds, but we're just in with everybody else, doing everything else. And then you have the sort of separatist half elves who are just like, again, they're into their warlock trip and they're just weird. And it just looks like a great grim, gritty, dark, no holds barred fantasy going on down there.
Yeah, and there are a lot of places where just kind of looking through it, like the sense of kind of history and the geopolitics that are kind of operating throughout
there's
this. That
something
there
going
are
on
plenty
everywhere. Something going on everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got your hardcore desert Muslims, up in the north,
Yeah.
grading down into the most educated, mercantile, and sort of the Moors, they call them, Mohr. You read about them and you're kind of like, these dudes are fine. The elves and the dwarves are over there cutting each other's throats and everything. These guys are fine. they go to school, they do their trade, they have their cities. You kind of get the idea. They kind of pop their heads over the mountains like, are you guys still at it? Okay, call us. No, call us when you get your Tolkien done. We're just over here having a nice life.
well, and if there's certain aspects that you don't particularly care for playing through, it's a big enough continent and it's divided, so you don't have to even include that. I mean,
you don't have to do everything. I mean, the idea. I mean, I've talked about this for a while. One of the biggest curses of '80s fantasy is the thing we're always in love with, which is these huge sprawling maps. And the curse is evident. My joke was, you pick up a book like the Raymond Feist books, or the Belgariad, right, by David Eddings, or any of those authors, and you open it up, and of course there's the map in the front of the book, and you're going to visit every fucking place on that map through the course of the book.
Yeah.
You just know.
Yeah.
You're like, oh. And but it's so different from the older fantasy authors who wrote cool stories and then sooner or later said, oh God, I have a fan base, I better make a map. I've got all my locations because I set the stories in them, but hopefully you're lucky and some fan sends you the map. Oh yeah, cool, official map. Good job, right? You never made the map to start. You were just writing cool cities and cool jungles and stuff. And so it seems to me that we sort of lost the fact that you don't start with the map. You only make a map after you have a bunch of good stories that are location based.
Yeah.
And so with a game like this, especially as Robbie said, I mean, the geopolitics are just too interesting. You go to anywhere on there and you have different interests in collision. Right? I mean, anywhere on the map, there's different attitudes. People there have opinions. And you go there and you say, okay, so what's the cool story here? What's the, what are we going to wake up? What are we going to, discover? What are we going to, what are we going to kick off between the interests? Has anyone ever looked into like when two living gods really disagree on something? Has anybody
Yeah.
thought about that part yet? And so, what happens with policy disputes in Ilraith? I'm not that confident, about how well that's going to go. And so, all those interests make you look at a spot on the map and go, okay, we're going to make up characters, who could be here. We're going to make them up. We're going to play something.
Yeah.
And you don't
And it
have
still
to
leaves
go. Go ahead, Robbie. Sorry. Yeah.
And it still leaves you plenty to kind of start filling in. Like, I think I like the touch of it. There's enough to get some really nice seeds going, but it doesn't, give you so much where you feel like, oh, I have to follow now.
Right. You can make, you can actually, as the game master, you can make stuff up.
Right.
We don't know exactly why the 7 cities got swallowed up and destroyed. We don't know, we don't know who rules this particular spot or what dramas or soap operas are going on. We don't know. Any number of cultural details can be filled in based on what you see and read. Then you say, well, I think that this is what they do to murderers in this town. Doesn't say. You just have to decide. And you have enough there because he has the little sort of types of governments and stuff listed for each location. You have enough to say, well, if that's the case, this culture, that's the case, tyranny here is going to look like this, right? And you can actually do that. So the ability to own the setting yourself is pretty strong. Yeah.
I feel like you'll find pretty much everything in there. It's just finding it sometimes can be kind of difficult because it's really kind of. I have the problem of being able to organize things like that too, is because everything to me, it just all kind of bleeds together so much that I find it's hard to just say, okay, well, this is all going to be here, right, because it's, some people are really good at that. That's one of my biggest weaknesses, staying organized.
A few years ago, I sat down and I mapped out all the gods, for example. And mapped out there are a bunch of the creatures go with specific gods. So this god, then we have these creatures, and then you go to the map and you say, oh, okay, so here is where this place is going to be infested with these creatures, because this god, his temples are this is his city, right?